Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Breeders' Cup webinar with Marcus Hersh, DRF handicapper, international correspondent, and, well, at least this week, amateur meteorologist, right, Marcus?
I resent the amateur categorization. I like to think of myself as a budding professional.
Okay,
No, I mean,
okay.
I try to keep an eye on the weather stuff, and you know, especially with all the rain they've had here, it's a major story. And we're talking about European horses here, and that's almost all grass racing. So it's one of the things that I think has been worth most closely following is the condition of the turf course, which obviously is predicated on the amount of rain. And the good thing here, Mike, is the measuring station, the Bluegrass Airport, is pretty much right across the street from Keeneland, so you can get a fairly accurate sense of how much rain did fall here.
Well, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and I'm Mike Hogan, Director of Product Marketing here at DRF. And Marcus, as you mentioned, we're going to be looking at the Breeders' Cup races, but particularly focused on the European runners that are coming over both on Friday and Saturday. There's also a chance for anybody that's watching the webinar to ask their questions. We'll probably naturally answer a lot of them as we go through our general discussion. If there are any that don't fit that, I may end up asking a few of those at the very end of the webinar today. So yeah, let's just dive right in, take a look at the first of the Breeders' Cup races, which is tomorrow, race 6. It's the BC Juvenile Turf, and it's the race with, what do we have, 4 Europeans in here and a full field of 14 plus and also eligible. The two most, I guess the two most fancied, at least in terms of the wagering overseas and in the morning line of the Europeans, drew the 2 worst posts in the field. So let's just start by what do you think about this race? What do you think, as you mentioned, that the turf course took a lot of rain over the last few days, but now is in the process of drying out? Will continue to dry out a little further by tomorrow, and then certainly a little bit more so by Saturday, since I don't believe there's any more rain in the forecast, right?
No, there's a 30% chance late Saturday afternoon, but let's hope that stays away. Before then, nothing. And it's really excellent drying conditions today. Well, I mean, it would be truly excellent if it were midsummer, you know, with a really long, a lot of daylight and warmer weather. But it's cool, but it's quite breezy. I like 15-mile-an-hour winds. So the turf is getting a good drying. Tomorrow, I don't see it being any better than good to soft. And so vis-a-vis these European horses, yes, let's start with Simric for John Gosden. You mentioned him, Mike. He's got the 13 post, and this horse has been training a few days. He goes out with Golden Horn, the favorite in the turf, his stablemate. And this is a really good-looking horse and a great mover, at least on the poly track training track. I didn't really see him go much. He went on turf today, but watching him gallop on poly track, I've been impressed. I've actually been impressed with everything about the horse. He's got good composure and good weight. And so Gosden was here today, and he's happy with the horse. He thinks he's doing really well, and that's A. And B, he says he has no concerns with this horse about its soft ground. The ground is not a problem. He said his concern is the post. He doesn't like the draw, obviously. And this, you know, being second by a neck in the Jean-Luc Lagardère in the ARC undercard that's serious form for this race. I would have picked Simric on top had he drawn better, but you know, it's a pretty short run into the first turn on this 7.5 furlong grass course, and he's going to need a lot to go right from there to get it done and to be easily the best horse in the race. Entirely possible using, but not in love with him at a shorter price. And Hit It a Bomb outside of him, you know, they're fairly close in the morning line and also in the betting. I feel like the price on Hit It a Bomb is more based on speculation and hype than anything else. I mean, he was clearly very impressive on the all-weather track in Dundalk last time. I don't have any qualms with that. I loved his race there, but this race, last I checked, was not on an all-weather surface. And while he ran pretty well, beating 21 foes in his debut at the Curragh, I didn't think he looked quite as good on grass. Of course, that could have been because it was his first race as well. But at another fairly short price, I mean, Hit It a Bomb, I'm using more defensively and in less of an engaged way than Simric, certainly.
All right. Well, I know you had a chance to walk the turf course at least a couple days ago. Have you had a chance to walk it since then?
Yeah, 3 times. I didn't yesterday, but I did today. Actually, kind of just followed a group of people, 2 of whom I knew and 2 of whom I didn't know, as they were walking across the main track after trading it ended. And the one of them that I didn't know was the director of the turf courses at Newmarket. So he knew quite a bit about grass. And we were walking all over the course, trying to figure out where the best ground was, what the drainage was like, and he had a lot of really interesting things to say. He thinks that, I was again surprised, Mike, as I was, when I first went out after rain a couple days ago, how quickly the course does drain. And while people were saying it was soft this morning for training, I mean, I really felt like it was less soft than I expected. There are places that are really soft, and an important thing to note is one of those places is the rail. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near the rail, especially in the home stretch, when you're trying to accelerate. I think that the best ground really is 3 to 5 paths, probably off the fence. It's packed down a little more. There's definitely less give to it. I just really hope that there's a good amount of drying before tomorrow, because you want everyone to have a fair shot at things here.
Right, of course. Well, there are a couple other Europeans in the Juvenile Turf. Do you think that either of them have a shot to hit the board or potentially take down the race, or do you see the race? Okay, well then, who do you like? Who do you like of the other 2?
Well, I don't like Birchwood because I don't think that he can go this far, and I certainly don't think he can go this far if it's a testing course at all. And he's by a sprinter and not from the sprint family, and I just think he's probably distance limited. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm against him. Shogun, the other horse, Aidan O'Brien's quote-unquote B horse. Ryan Moore is riding Hit It a Bomb. That's the stable's main jockey. It's a shame you haven't on Shogun. I give him a little bit of a chance. He really wasn't beaten all that much in the Jean-Luc Lagardère 1 3/4 lengths. He's a length and a half behind Simric. And interestingly, they've been doing some blinkers experimentation with this horse. He wore them twice. They were off last time, back on again now. I thought his run on soft turf behind Harold the Dawn 2 back at the Curragh was decent. He's got a much better draw than those other 2 horses in 4, and he's going to be 3 times or 4 times the price. I'm using him for sure. Yeah,
I like him a little bit too, and I've noticed that aside from the 2 years in recent history where they didn't run the juvenile races with Lasix, the Europeans that have not run on Lasix have not performed nearly as well as the ones that have, at least in recent history. Since 2008, we haven't had a winner of any of the grass races in the Breeders' Cup run without Lasix. So, I'm wondering if that could help.
Birchwood or no Lasix,
Right. I'm wondering if that could help him turn the tables on Simric, even though he was beaten a length and a quarter.
Yeah, well, that and the draw. Things are going to be a lot easier from 4 for him than they are for William Buick out there in 13.
Right. All right, well, let's jump to the next of the, we'll skip over the dirt mile unless you have something particularly interesting to say about how Liam's Map might lose at a short price.
I don't think he's going to lose, but my plan was to kind of be a little bit against Lee because I thought they were pointing for the grass race and then switched to dirt at the last minute because of the rain. But I actually just happened to see Lee gallop on Poly track this morning, and he was very sharp looking. I'm less opposed to Lee now than I was. Yeah.
Really?
But yes, moving on.
All right. Well, you think what you saw was enough to convince you that Liam's Map may be vulnerable to Lee, or is he still?
No.
Okay. Well then,
because
maybe
I really feel like if I'm not sure that Lee is the horse that he was at his very best. I mean, he's had a long year, and I thought he ran a really good race last time at Woodbine on the grass, but he had tailed off late in the Saratoga meet too. And I mean, I'm worried that he's not going to get back to his best. And beyond that, I mean, Liam's map is his best race is probably better than what Lee has run. Besides which, he has a pace advantage. Everything could go wrong for that horse, you know. And I'm not advocating playing him at odds on, but I'm not trying to beat that horse.
Right. All right, well, let's jump to the 8th race tomorrow. It's the Juvenile Fillies Turf, and there are, I believe, 3 runners from Europe coming into this race?
You've got Last Waltz, who's with Chad Brown now, but has never run in the States. You've got Illuminate, Richard Bannon.
Sure.
And then you've got Alice Springs for O'Brien, and finally Nemoralia ran in the Frizette, ran a good race to finish second, but she is basically a Euro because she's trained by the Englishman Jeremy Noceda, and she's just happened to be running her second race in the States. So yeah, let's say 4 kind of.
All right. Well, are there any of those that you particularly fancy, or do you think that this is a race where the Europeans don't necessarily have as much of an edge over the Americans?
I like Alice Springs in here, Mike. The Irish horses cleared quarantine yesterday afternoon, and everyone went to the main track today. She was actually maybe the least impressive of all the O'Brien horses and the one David Walkman's horse. But I'm not saying she looked bad. She's very filly-ish, kind of petite. But she, I think she's got a claim on this race. I don't think she was at her best 2 back going 3/4 against Illuminate in the Shively Park, and I really feel like her race October 3rd was more like a paid workout than anything. I mean, she was 2 to 5 in the race. She won like breaking sticks. She's run against some really good horses in Ballydoyle and Minding a couple times, and was 3rd to them in the Moyglare stud. I think she might be okay on the softer turf, and I know that she's going to get the distance. I mean, she should be absolutely fine at a mile with her pedigree, and I think she's going to be an appealing price. I mean, I think she might be twice the price in pari-mutuel betting here that she is overseas right now, which is not everything, but I'm just saying that for what she seems to be to folks overseas, she might offer some value in these pools here. I don't know, were you against this horse?
No. I actually like her a little bit. And I think she's going to be a much nicer price than what Illuminate will likely offer. And she only finished 3/4 of a length behind her in that race 2 back, where you mentioned she might not have been at her best. But now, of course, she's getting Lasix. Illuminate is not. I think Illuminate may end up being the favorite, if not the second choice, depending upon what people do with Harmonize. And who gets bet more heavily, but I think Alex Springs may get a little overlooked and offer some value. Yeah.
I agree, and I really prefer, personally, I really prefer her to Illuminate. I have major questions about Illuminate getting this distance, as do, I think Frankie Dettori does. I've heard him mention it several times, the distance is going to be the question for her. She may very well be more of a sprinty, precocious type, and, the record of the barn, this is Richard Handon Jr., but he followed right in the footsteps of his father, Richard Handon Sr. They've had nothing but dreadful luck in the States in general and in Breeders' Cup races in particular. I also don't think that, softer turf does this filly Illuminate any favors, and just not that keen on her.
Yeah. Well, now, why do you think it is that the Handons have had such dreadful luck in the U.S.?
I have no idea. For a long time, he didn't want to come with anything. They had a horse break down early on, decades ago, in a race, and that left a really, really bad taste in their mouth, I know. And it's a highly, highly successful operation, particularly with 2-year-olds. But they've just had, the horses just haven't suited the races. They're either all tailing off or are getting the wrong kind of ground, or something in the preparation doesn't go right. I'm sure someday it will change, but I'm not going to be betting Illuminate at a shorter price because I have too many questions about her, and I'm sure she'll go out and prove me wrong. But you mentioned Harmonize, Mike, and I actually overheard an interesting conversation today because the crazy thing here is there's so much access. The Keeneland backstretch is unlike any other backstretch. People can just drive in, and walk through the barns a lot of the time. There's a little more security now, but for instance, like down at the training track, I just have been standing like inside the fence right at the gap where the horses come up from the barns, and I don't know. I'm just standing there and hearing things. I hear a lot of stuff, and I overheard Bill Ma talking to, I don't know. I just think there's questions about how Harmonize is going to go when it's on the wet. I really wonder about that. I think she's talented, but I don't know that I'm starting to think the Europeans could have, and they have a really good chance in this race. I don't think that Nemeralia is necessarily good enough. I think she'd like it if they took this race off the grass. Then she'd be a standout on dirt. But last Waltz, it was interesting talking to Chad Brown a couple days ago. He was really, really disappointed that this horse drew 14 because he said he likes her a lot. I mean, it seems like more than the typical trainer speak. She's worked twice for him. She's a big filly, got a lot of scope to her. I think he said the work October 18th. She worked in company with What's the Chances, who was placed first in the Beverly D, an older mare, and it sounded from what he said like this filly outworked What's the Chances, or at least made her work to keep up. I think he was expecting a big performance, and this horse is 20-1 on the line. I think you got to throw her in somehow, some way, but the draw is just a huge impediment to victory, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, earlier on today's webinar, which I imagine being out at Keeneland and being so busy today, you weren't able to listen to, and that's okay if you weren't. So I'll mention something I'll mention something Brad Free said, which was interesting, and I hadn't thought about before. And he actually asked the question. I said, "Boy, we've got Marcus on in the webinar later. I'll put it straight to him." He made the implication that the juvenile fillies, the Euros haven't done quite as well in the juvenile filly races as they have in the juvenile turf races.
That's true.
And in this year, he noted that the 3 winner you're in filly races, none of them chose to come over, and he thought that might be an indication that the U.S. and Canadian contingent could potentially be, if not better, at least not much more behind the 8 ball than what you're seeing in the Colts and Geldings.
I'm not really necessarily buying that because those are big races, and the best 2-year-olds don't ever come anyway. I mean, if a horse won one of those a big win in your in race, then there's they may be pointed to things like the Guineas races next year rather than this kind of race. I mean, I can see it. I mean, there haven't been enough of these races yet. We're dealing with a really small sample size, and I'm not going to rush to judgment. I mean, it has been the case that the Colts have been more successful, but I'm pretty confident that in the right situation, an overseas filly can win this race. I do think that as a group, the Euro Colts are stronger on the whole. But again, I picked Alice Springs to win, so I think that a European is going to win this race.
Yeah. All right. Well,
just one other horse.
Sure.
This horse, Gliding By, I saw her work early in the week. She was one of the more impressive horses that I saw work. I mean, I don't know what that translates to. She's a Woodbine maiden winner, but it was a pretty sharp maiden win that showed a lot of potential. First Lasix, first time in the Mott stable, and she's going to be a huge price. I may tinker around with her a bit too.
And I don't know if you've been watching any of the races today at Keeneland, but I believe it was the 5th race, the 2-year-old filly race.
Yeah.
There was a very impressive winner trained by Bill Mott named Karina Mia. And my understanding, my understanding is that she's been working with Gliding By in the morning.
Yeah, I did not realize that when I saw gliding by. She was going solo. It may just have been in a gallop. I think that was Monday when I first got here. But I mean, if she's been working heads up with that filly, that's an even stronger recommendation because Karina Mia she was awesome in her win.
Yeah. She couldn't have been more impressive in that win. All right. Well, I think did we cover all of the Europeans in the Juvenile Fillies Turf? I believe we did. So let's jump ahead. Unless you have any strong opinions that you want to cover in the distaff, let's jump to Saturday.
Nope. Let's move ahead.
All right. So on Saturday, pulling up the card and formulator, the first of the turf races is the Turf Sprint. However, that doesn't have any foreign shippers.
Nope.
So we'll skip over that one. We'll jump to the sixth race on Saturday's card, which is the Filly and Mare Turf. Another very interesting one, and I believe it's the first time it will be run at 1 mile and 3/16 due to the configuration of Keeneland's turf course.
Yeah. Were you with Legatissimo or against Legatissimo?
Oh, can I be both? I think she's probably the best horse in the race, and I think she's probably the most likely winner, but I'm afraid she's just going to be a bit overbet, and I could see a scenario where she doesn't win. So,
right.
You know,
so using her, but not leaning completely on her, like
using her, but not singling her. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha.
What's your take?
Well, if the course were firm, I would consider her as a single because I think she's a standout, but it's not. And interestingly, somebody on Twitter pointed this out to me because I assumed that she was fine going on either because she won the Matron Stakes on soft ground at Leopardstown. And what was pointed out by this Irish guy is that the trainer said afterward he had gone to the race course expecting to scratch her because he doesn't want to run her on soft ground. And then he walked the course and he was surprised at how much it had dried out, and he left her in, and she won. That was, to me, a hugely impressive race. I mean, that she might not have beaten the be-all end-all of Fields, but she just did it so, the way she cruised up to the front and went on about her business, I thought was extraordinary. But I mean, that the ground concern, makes me, at the price that she's going to be, less inclined to hang my hat on her, and rely completely on her to get me home in multi-race wagers or on top of a trifecta or alone or something like that. I mean, she's the most accomplished filly in the race, and I think she's really, really good. I mean, I've watched most of her races this year and covered several of them. What's especially impressive with her is she's done so many different things, straight course miles, around bends, and 1.25 miles. She almost stayed 1.5 miles in the Oaks. She just got nipped, but 1 mile and 3/16 I think is just right at her wheelhouse. And she seems athletic enough to to deal with the tight turns. It's just that one question about the ground that makes it a little bit concerning for me with her.
Yeah. That is. I've heard the same sort of thing, so I'm glad you verified that, because I've heard that soft course at Leopardstown maybe wasn't quite as soft as it was made out.
Yeah, exactly. Because Golden Horn ran the same card, and had it been especially soft, they would have scratched him too.
Right.
Because he was scratched out of the King George over the summer at Ascot because it was heavy there. So yeah, it might have been soft, good to soft, or something like that. But hopefully by Saturday, this course will be similar to that, and she won't have any issues.
Right. So if not her, then who?
Well, I mean, I think Secret Gesture bears some serious consideration. She's got a bad draw, but it should work out for her because they start right in the end of the turn, and so that basically gives the whole home stretch to sort things out. It's not ideal for sure, but she could get positioned. I talked to her trainer Ralph Beckett yesterday, and he says the way that she goes, just her action and her style, would make you think of a horse that would be good on firm or fast ground, but the truth is she's really good on soft. I mean, he doesn't care about the rain at all. In fact, I think there was some disappointment that there was so much drying already going on earlier today, because if it had stayed softer, they felt probably they would have had a better chance to upset Legatissimo. But one thing this mare has going for her, obviously, is that she's been twice to the States, and she was disqualified from the victory in the Beverly D, but she was the best horse in the race. And so we know she does fine going left-handed, and we know she travels well, which is interesting because when I saw her at Arlington, I basically almost tossed her right away because she's just such a light-made filly. I thought she had lost weight shipping, but that's just who she is. She's skinny. She's a skinny horse. In fact, Beckett said, she's one of the tougher horses that he's trained. She's just a very tough horse, even though she doesn't carry a lot of flesh to her. And again, she's come here in good form. They considered running in a race, and she had a little bit of a hiccup a couple months ago, but she's since passed that. They had considered the E.P. Taylor Stakes for her, but decided to wait and go for this instead. She gets Florent Giroux, who is having a great year, and should suit her pretty well. And I think she's a horse who could get a big piece of this at a price.
All right. Anybody else in this race that you think could have a chance to hit the board? Are you looking at only a European try, or are any of the North American contingent players in this one for you?
Well, Stephanie's Kitten will like it soft.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
But I just don't think that she's going to be good enough to beat all of the Europeans. I mean, I included Miss France in my selections, and she's impressed me, especially today. I thought she had a really good training session today. I think she's doing well, and she's a potential improver who won the French 1,000 guineas last year. She's got some class. I suppose the mile and 3/16 would be a bit of a question for her. It wouldn't be, nor would the soft ground be for another France-based horse, Bowina, but she may lack the quality to actually win. She's usable. And one other horse, Mike, that we should probably know, who's a recent import to the U.S. is Dacita, this Chilean horse who was so impressive in the Boston Spa. I mean, that was a wicked turn of foot she showed in the stretch. So here's another little Chad Brown story. They had talked to the Chilean connection before that race at Saratoga because the ground had gone so fast and hard there for when the Boston Spa was run. And the question was put, is this a horse that's going to be able to handle that? And they were told that will be the softest course this horse has ever run on. So,
wow.
I mean, the reason he mentioned this is in the context of just being kind of skeptical that she might be able to reproduce that race over this kind of going. It's a question that I'm taking to heart.
Right. And I had heard that she was entered but scratched from a race at Belmont due to the ground coming up too soft.
Exactly. That would have been the Flower Bowl, I would imagine.
Right. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, so they're here. She hasn't run. She's pointed to the race. I'm imagining she'll be in the field, but I've got to downgrade her chances absolutely because of the condition of the turf.
Right. Well, one other horse I want to ask about before we move on. You mentioned the stablemate, although from an owner's standpoint, although trained by Freddie Head, number 6 Queen's Jewel.
Oh yeah, the other Euro.
And if we were 20 years ago, would be coupled in the entry with Bowina. Do you give her a shot to kind of forgive those last two efforts as, I guess, rather dreadful efforts as favorite in albeit in Group 1 racing? Now with the addition of a Lasix here and under the care of Freddie Head, who knows how to win some Breeders' Cup races?
Yeah, well, I mean, the talk that I've heard is that the Lasix could be the key. I mean, nobody has come out and said she's a bleeder, but that's the implication, is that she may have bled in those races. So, I mean, if that were the case, I mean, I don't back a lot of favorites, but I bet on this horse in the French Oaks because I thought she was so good that I'm like, oh, she's just going to crush these horses, and she was 11th. So what I'm getting at is that early this year she looked like just a top class filly. I mean, it hasn't come right for her at all. And my thought, is that even if Lasix does prove to be a benefit, I mean, she's gotten virtually nothing out of these races. She hasn't run a good race since May. And I don't even know that, I mean, the form of her wins early in the year hasn't worked out that well either. So she might not be as good as it seemed, even if she does get back to that. So I'm against her, to put it in a nutshell.
No, that's cut right to the chase, Marcus. You don't have to beat around the bush about what you think. All right, well, let's move on to the next grass race on the card, skipping over the BC Sprint. We'll go to the 8th race. It's the Breeders' Cup Mile, of course.
Right.
And it's another race where your favorite is likely to be a European. But there are a couple ways you can go here. Where did you land in the mile?
I picked Make Believe to win, and I picked Caraconti's second, Esoteric third, and another European fourth. maybe Mondialiste, who is not as good as the other horses, but is a horse that is absolutely going to be fine on the soft going.
Sure.
I mean, it could happen, but I'll be really, really surprised if an American horse wins this race. The Europeans ran 1, 2, 3 last year. The French ran 1, 2. In fact, the last 7 times an American-based horse didn't win the mile, it was a horse from France that won. The French horses have dominated this race.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're going to do so again this year. I mean, the English horse of, pretty high merit is Time Test, who I talked to his trainer, Roger Charlton, today, who was, he's very astute, and he is actually quite good in talking about the horse and the situation. And this horse he looked good today, and the trainer said he was very, very happy with the way he traveled, which was a question because he hadn't done anything but take a van ride to different tracks around England so far. But he wasn't bothered by the flying and the new surroundings at all. However, the hope is to get firm turf for this horse.
Right.
And they're not going to get that, so that's an issue. And then you toss in 2 other things, post 12, which is really, really bad, and the fact he may be more of a natural, this is what Roger Charlton said. He said his best distance is 1.25 miles. They cut him back to 1 mile in the Joel Stakes, mainly because they figured that the big 1.25 mile race at the end of the year, the Champion Stakes at Ascot, it's almost always run when the course has got a lot of give to it, and it was again, and they didn't want to run him on that kind of course. So the horse is doing fine, and they wanted to finish off the campaign with something, so they thought, Judd Montu likes to run horses in the States. Let's turn it back to 1 mile and see if he's got enough speed for it and go for the Breeders' Cup, which is a really nice plan, and it might still work, and it probably would have worked better had the rain not come and he'd not drawn so poorly. He is a horse that is going to stay in training next year, almost certainly, and this could be, it seems strange to think of it, but as much as anything, a good experience for him to travel and to get a good race into him and send him into a little winter holiday in hopes of having him come back even stronger next year. But then you got to sorting through these French horses is not an easy task.
Right. Right.
And I have been thinking for quite some time that Caraconti was going to offer a lot of value. I still think he will in this race. He's the defending champion, and he's going to be a much longer price than several other Europeans, which is a little strange to think of since he's the one who's done it and shown that he handles this kind of course. The question with him is, his win came off a really hot pace on a very firm turf at Santa Anita, and can he duplicate that performance under different ground conditions? And even though obviously it's going to the front, I don't know that they're going to be going nearly as fast as they did last year when it was just a wicked early tempo. But I don't have a concern, Mike, about his somewhat scattered form from this year. He had a quarter crack at the beginning of the year. They didn't rush him back because the goal the whole year was to run in this race again. You know, the course in the Jacques Leroy was too soft for him, and he went to the front last time in the Prix du Moulin, and that, you know, if you watch this Breeders' Cup Mile, this is the last horse in the world you would expect to go to the lead. And he ran pretty well. I mean, he was only beaten 2 lengths. So I think he got enough out of those 2 races that he's on a good pattern, and he's looked as well as anybody among the Europeans I've seen. He's a lot, as you'd expect, as a 4-year-old. He's a bigger, stronger horse than he was last year. He's come here in really in good physical condition. It's just a question of if he can produce that kind of acceleration on the softer ground.
Yeah, well, I like the way you're thinking, because like you, I picked Make Believe on top and Caraconte second. And, you know, I do, it's interesting because even though he's only run 2 races in 2015 and hasn't maybe run, he hasn't maybe run to his odds, finishing 6th at 5-1 and 3rd at 5-2, you could argue he's actually coming into this race in better form than he was coming into it last year.
Yeah, well, I mean, he ran the Prix de la Forêt last year and he had an absolutely terrible trip in that race. It was hard. It clouded things, and then he drew really poorly in the race. But you know, you're absolutely right. And this horse, like Make Believe, won the French 2,000 Guineas this year. Caraconte won it last year. He's got to establish very high-class mile form, and if he's 12-1, you know, I'll have to have a little bit of a win bet on him.
Sure.
But Make Believe could be really. I mean, this horse could be really, really good. He's only run 6 times.
Let's go back to Make Believe for a second. So he's coming off of his top Racing Post race, at least his fastest race of his career in the last start, after a little bit of a layoff. Is there any concern at all about him regressing from that effort with the travel in between, or do you see this as a lightly raced 3-year-old that just is getting better as he's progressing through his campaign?
Well, you know, I mean, there could be a little concern about that, and it is a fairly quick turnaround. But Don Andre Fabre would have sent him if everything didn't look okay coming out of that race. I mean, he's not one to just take a shot, you know. He strikes me as a very conservative trainer who, if he didn't like the way the horse had trained since that run, would have just put him away and waited for a better time. So I think he did get a really good trip in that race, sitting right in behind and getting through. But to me, he really displayed athleticism and excuse me, a strong turn of foot. And what was kind of important about the way he ran was that he was comfortable enough being in behind horses, because I believe his issue has been over-eager racing. He went to the lead when he won the 2,000 Guineas, and that was a very, very impressive win. I mean, he won easily. But it may have gotten him all stoked up because he went to the lead next time in St. James's Palace and just completely fell apart. Like he blew all his stamina early or something. Because he didn't run close to his best race, obviously. Great race. I mean, Glen Eagles won. Glen Eagles is in the Breeders' Cup Classic. But for this horse, you know, to come back and be a little more tractable, I thought was important. But we know he's not a typical European in that he has speed and he's not afraid to use it. So I mean, I think he gets potentially a pretty good trip. Maybe, you know, right in behind, obviously, although you would hope that he doesn't get stuck down on the inside where the turf is softer. But I mean, come on, Olivier Pellier, he's won the mile 3 times. He'll make it happen. Right.
Well, let's talk about a couple others before we move on from this race that we haven't mentioned so far yet. Number 5, Impassable, the 3-year-old filly, trying older males in this race. And then I also want to touch on our second choice on the morning line, Esoterique. Which one would you like to start with?
Well, I mean, Esoterique to me is the more formidable horse, although I understand why some people think Impassable has some improvement in her. But I know Esoterique has been aimed at this race for quite a while now, and she's had a great year. She's 5. I think. I mean, I don't think they would say it, but I think she was kept in training this year maybe because she didn't finish off her 4-year-old. She's in great form. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. She's a Group 1 winner, or, in August of 2014, and she's been a good horse for a long time. I like her race 2 back, the Jacques Leroy, probably was the best race she's ever run. I think she was pretty impressive there. But it's important to note that race, and in fact her last 4 races, all were run on a straight course. And though she's been okay around right-handed turns, she's never won around left-handed. And since all of her best races were down the straightaway, we just don't know if she can produce that same kind of form and how she's going to respond to a tight turning course. I mean, she's not some huge, gargantuan, clumsy-looking mare at all. I mean, she's handy enough, and she and Make Believe both look fine, along with Miss France. All 3 of Bob's horses seem to have shipped well and settled in comfortably, and are holding their flesh well. I mean, I think she's a solid bet to run a representative race, but I don't know that she's necessarily going to win this race. I mean, the Impassable, I have to say, I wasn't really taken with the way she looked today. She looked a little uncomfortable galloping on the poly track, and she's going to need to be coming forward, absolutely, I think, to have a chance to finish in the top 3. I mean, she's as good as she's looked and as good as a record as she has. And she beat Miss France last time and did it pretty nicely with a good turn of foot. She's yet to even compete in a Group 1 race, and I think it's a big ask to step up and beat all these good horses.
Okay, well, I've seen she's won on both soft and firm going. Do you know if she has any sort of footing preference? Is she hoping for
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. It's a question that I wanted to pose to somebody, but I haven't been able to track down connections. And I can't profess to have any expertise in that matter.
Okay. Again, I appreciate the honesty. Well, let's unless you have anything else to say about the mile, let's move on to the turf. It's the 10th race.
Unless you want to stop on Waterloo. You want to stop on Waterloo Bridge in the Juvenile?
Oh yeah, let's do it. Actually, I had forgotten that he was in there.
Don't like him. We can move on.
You don't like him. All right. If this race were suddenly moved to the turf, would you upgrade it?
Yeah, no, but I mean, I would like him a little if he hadn't drawn so awfully. I mean, he's marooned on in 14. That's too much. I mean, and his pedigree is definitely not screaming dirt. But I think he's pretty good, and also he is a good-looking animal. I saw him today, and he didn't do that much, but he looked formidable enough. But I just can't with the post and the dirt. I just can't do it. He's out.
So Zoffany over a Dr. Fong mare does not scream dirt to you?
Dr. Fong, that's what I always think of. When I think of Dr. Fong, I think of hook races at Los Al.
All right, well, let's move on. The 10th race on Saturday is the Breeders' Cup Turf, and you have, at least on the morning line, now the co-shortest price of all the 13 Breeders' Cup, with now the updated morning line, of course, of American Pharoah at 4-5, with the news that Beholder is scratching. But first, before we get there, I'm talking about Golden Horn, drew the 1 post, 4-5 on the morning line. Your ARC winner coming over. Do you think he is your stone single? I know there's some concern about the footing, and you might want it a little firmer than he could possibly get it on Saturday. But still, he's probably the best horse in the race. Do you think he is easily the most likely winner, and at 4-5, your strong single in your multi-race wagers?
I would say that he's by a wide margin the best horse in the race. I have no doubt about that. But I could not recommend just simply blindly singling the horse because of the circumstances. I mean, first of all, I mean, I'm not that concerned about the course configuration, a tighter, more turning track than he's ever raced on, because he's an athlete, and he's got speed. He likes to show some pace. The reason that they decided to come here is because he should be suited to American racing. Part of what he's suited to is firm turf. That he's a firmed, fast ground kind of horse who can show up if it's slightly softer, but is not a soft ground lever. So the horse trained on turf today and actually looked fine going over it when it was pretty soft. And the thought is, this is Dettori's thought, Dettori is close to Wesley Ward, and Wesley Ward is based here and knows, what things are like here pretty well. And Ward has been telling Dettori that the horse is going to drive fast, and that it's going to be good by this weekend. And Dettori thinks that if that's true, if it goes back to being good, or even good to soft, it will be fine for a Golden Horn. I mean, John Gosden was very straightforward. He said, it is what it is. We didn't want it to rain, or it's disappointing that it rained. He said if the turf were firm, he would be as confident in this horse as you could be in a horse going around tight turns for the first time. But what he's saying is, he would have been on firm turf. He would have been that stone cold single you're talking about, I think. But now there's just enough shadow of doubt, and you will get paid if you get the right alternative to him and pick anything, that it may be worth fishing around a little bit.
Yeah, and is there a chance?
But as far as yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is there a chance this will now be his 8th race of his 3-year-old year, that maybe he's not set to run a top effort off of what's been a rather long campaign, perhaps, and though he's shown no signs of slowing down, maybe with the travel and maybe not the preferred surface and at a short price, is it enough to make you think, okay, maybe we need to go a little deeper?
I'm not worried about that at all. Yes, it should be, in theory, a concern, but this horse has taken everything that's... Oh my God, he's tremendous. He weighs 4.5 pounds more. He weighed 4.5 pounds more when he left to come here than he did before the arc. So he put the weight on for the race right away, and he would never have been considered for this race if he hadn't come out of that so fast. I mean, you would think that it should be something to worry about. The long campaign, the huge race in the arc, but the trainer's not concerned about it, and I'm not concerned about it either. If it were just a question of that, I wouldn't have any worry whatsoever. It's really only, for me, it's only the turf.
All right, well then, let's talk about some of the others in the race, both the Americans and the other Europeans in the race. If you think he's your most likely winner, who do you like to either hit the board at a nice price, or if he's possibly vulnerable, who do you think has a good shot to upset him?
Pizza Man.
Pizza Man.
That's the other horse to me.
Yeah.
As strange as it is to say, the Pizza
Man. Did you think you would be saying those words 6 months ago?
No, I didn't think I would be saying those words 3 months ago, 2 months ago. I mean, what can you say about the horse? It just keeps getting, he's 6, but I don't see that he's not just getting better and better. It was one thing to win the Arlington Million, which was, he ran a good race, very good race. And the Stars and Stripes is better than it looks on paper, too. He was in trouble that whole race. He looked like destined to lose, and I'm not sure how he ended up winning even. But then, on top of all that, to cut back from 1.5 miles, 1.25 miles to a mile, and run the way he did over this course when it was yielding. We know he handles this kind of course, this very course when it's wet. I mean, that was a tremendous effort. And I talked to Florent Giroux. He said that he was the one that suggested that they run in the Shadwell and not ship anywhere or do anything else. The horse, if you go back to last year, the races that he ran that don't look as good, like you're like, oh, he went to the Northern Dancer and he ran into better horses and he runs fifth. And then at Hollywood he looks like he's going to win and he doesn't finish and he gets passed by a couple horses. If he can lose to Patriotic and Proud, how good is he? Well, the whole thing. I'm sorry, that was Del Mar at the Hollywood Turf Cup, but he didn't ship well last year. And the first time he went to Woodbine, he completely stopped eating once he got there. And this was a horse that was on the light side to begin with, and he couldn't afford to lose much weight. I really believe that the shipping, like we saw what happened with Beholder when she shipped here, it just didn't work out for her. Some horses are not meant to travel like that, and that's what was happening to this horse last year when he could have been developing into the horse we've seen this year. But he's a completely different horse. Just seeing him this morning, he's so much more mature than he was even a summer ago. I mean, he just took a long time to come right, I guess, because he's better now than he's ever been. I mean, I thought he had a great gallop on the poly track this morning, and he likes it soft. He can stay the mile and a half. I don't think he's going to be 15-1 like he is on the line, but he'll sure be a way better price than Golden Horn.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting information. I didn't realize that he had trouble eating when traveling, and I didn't realize he was somewhat of a light horse. It kind of goes counter to what I would think with a name like the Pizza Man. I would expect him to be pretty big.
Yeah, you saw him in his stall munching on pizzas all day. Thus the name. As a yearling, he couldn't decide whether he preferred sausage or green pepper, so we'd give him two. He'd eat both of them.
So we have a question from one of our attendees. Is it a concern for you that he hasn't worked since his win in the Shadwell Turf Mile? I know you've seen him gallop a little bit, but he hasn't had a published work.
He did work.
Oh,
he worked
you're right.
October
he did.
At Churchill. And also, I was curious about just working once, but what Giroux said was that the Shadwell actually was his work for the Breeders' Cup. Not even joking. He meant it.
Yeah. Well, it was a nice paid workout there. Even though he didn't win, he almost did, and he got some good place money in a Grade 1. My question for you, and you may or may not know it, so I'm going to put you on the spot, and it's okay if you pass. But I don't believe there's ever been a Breeders' Cup Turf winner to have prepped at a mile and then gone on to win at 12 furlongs.
Oh, I would imagine there might not have been a starter like that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, have there been many horses that have even tried that?
Oh, no, that's highly unconventional.
Yeah.
Highly unconventional. But, so here's their situation. They ran the Million. They knew they wanted to run in this race. But that's kind of they didn't want to go the whole time without racing him.
Right.
But since he's had he's based at the Churchill Downs Trading Center in Louisville. So what race could he run in? He could have run in the Kentucky Downs mile-and-a-half race.
Right.
But they didn't want to run him a mile and a half 2 times in a row.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to run him at Kentucky Downs, which is it's a European style track. It's completely different and maybe messes with his rhythm or whatever. So the race also, they're not going to ship to New York to run in the Joe Hersh with a horse that might not ship well, and then would be.
Right.
I agree with not taking on top competition in your prep race either. The race they were considering was an odd one, the Commonwealth Cup over a mile and 8 at Laurel. But again, that would have involved shipping. So
right.
What Giroux's argument was he's got the ability to run well in a shorter distance. You get a trip over the track. You only have to ship him 70 miles, and just use this as a pure prep for the next race. So that's what they did. It's very unconventional. I like it. I think it could work.
Yeah. I like it too, and I think like in the mile, I think we picked this. I picked Golden Horn on top and the Pizza Man second. So, and if it flips and reverses, is so much the better because I'll be using them nearly equally, or at least in terms of value, I'll have more equity on the Pizza Man if he wins than I would on Golden Horn. So,
Yeah,
what
I'm having
about
the same approach.
yeah? What about the other European in the race? Number 9 found the 3-year-old filly trying older males for Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore. What do you make of her shot or her chances in this race?
Yeah, well, I mean, she's a very good horse. I mean, she wouldn't be. She's probably better than the American horses, you know, in terms of what she's accomplished. Excuse me, I don't see a lot of these horses that would have finished second in the Irish Champion Stakes, second in the British, you know, Kipco British Champion Stakes. But really, the question with her is, can she take another bite of this apple so soon? She ran in the Arc on October 4th, and she didn't run that hard because she got in trouble and wasn't going to win, and she finished 9th. But then, I mean, she came back 13 days later at Ascot and ran a huge race, ran really well. She beat Jack Hobbs, the Irish Derby winner, who was the favorite in that race, and was beaten only by Fascinating Rock. But now she's back again 2 weeks later. I mean, it seems to me the pattern she was on is she was set up to run her best race in the Champion, and she did. I think she ran as well as she can run, and she came close to winning it. But I feel like this is just a little bit of an afterthought, and I would have some concern about her ability to produce her best race on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of with you, and it's the same layoff that Glen Eagles is doing for Aidan O'Brien in the next race in the Classic, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm using Formulator here to show how Aidan has had a number of shippers to the U.S. run on 2 weeks or fewer, 14 days or fewer. And I actually wanted to take a look at how he does with foreign shippers off of that length of layoff. He's had a lot of success in North America. He's 0 for 14 with them, and he's only had 1 run second and 2 run third. And a lot of them finished out of the money at very short prices, including, legitimate horses like Master of Hounds and, even Viscount Nelson and, Acceleration in the mile a few years ago at 2-1.
That was the big one. That was the big one.
Yeah, it just seems like not his move, and I'm kind of thinking along the same lines as you, as in terms of this being a bit of an afterthought.
Yeah, I mean, I may put her on 1 ticket just so I don't have to bury my head in my hands because she's good enough. On a level playing field, she can't beat Golden Horn anyway.
Right.
But in case he didn't handle the ground, she's capable of winning if it somehow works out for her.
Right. All right. Well, let's move on to the Classic. Of course, it's now a little bit more or less of an interesting race, both from a fan standpoint and a betting standpoint, with the news that Beholder is scratched.
Really sad.
But let's, we can talk about what your thoughts are on American Pharoah for a second, and whether you think now with even more of a pace advantage, he gets an early lead and then just improves his position.
Yes.
But I'll ask you this question. So the wild card in the race is Aidan O'Brien's Glen Eagles, who's of course trying dirt for the first time. And trying 10 furlongs for the first time, never having raced further than a mile. Are either of those, from what you've seen of his races and from what you know of his pedigree, are you concerned about either of those, him handling the surface, handling the distance? First question.
I'm more concerned about the surface than the distance, really. I mean, he's been entered at 1.25 miles a couple of times, but they scratched him. I mean, this horse has been scratched 3 times because of concerns over soft ground, and they obviously were legitimate concerns because he ran way below his best last time at Ascot. But I think he's a miler at heart, but a mile and a quarter on a flat track, fast dirt surface, he probably would stay that. But you're just guessing. They're just guessing about the dirt.
Right.
You know, Galileo, he's a great sire with some versatility to his progeny. I wouldn't be surprised if the horse handles it. I mean, he's got the speed to win mile races easily, but he has always used his speed near the end of the races in the beginning. And isn't he going to have to be used to keep some sort of position here? So you're going to send him along and ask him to keep up with a faster pace than he's used to running on a new surface, making only a second start since June. I mean, I think it's a lot to ask. He might be capable, but I can't play him really.
Right. Yeah, that was my next question in terms of the tactics. Do you see a world in which Ryan Moore out of the gate says I can't get too far behind American Pharoah too early, and I'm going to have to use him, and maybe he's the one that sits second to American Pharoah, or maybe right there with Smooth Roller and maybe Frosted, and he's actually pressing the pace and trying to push American Pharoah along. Do you see that from what you've seen in his running style could very well be their tactics? No?
No. I mean, that's not how he's run. They like to hold him a little bit early and sit several lengths off the pace, and then swoop down, and he just crushes them with a strong, sustained move. I mean, nothing. Maybe he's been trained differently with this in mind. I mean, they have talked about this race for a while, and I think part of the reason they ran in the QE2 was because he needed a race if he was going to come here. But there's nothing that he's done that suggests he's a natural pace horse going a mile and a quarter on dirt. I mean, I think his best chance would have been to have someone like the Holder engage American Pharoah and come at them from the 3/8 pole home, but he can't really do that.
Right. Well, what do you think? Do you think he's more likely to hit the board or more likely to finish in the bottom two?
I think on pure class he won't finish in the bottom two. I think he's more likely to hit the board than finish in the bottom two.
Okay, well, if he does, even with American Pharoah finishing first, which he now seems to be likely odds on, if he hits the board, he could help round out your exotics. But I'm kind of with you with a lot of the questions, and with Aiden's record with these runners. I'm not really going to be worried about him too much on the win end.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Marcus. We've gone an hour and a few minutes over, but it's been a fantastic conversation. I learned a lot from you, and it's always a pleasure talking to you, especially about European racing and how it translates to racing over here in North America. Best of luck with the Breeders' Cup, and I hope we were right at least on a couple of the races today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Mike. I enjoyed it.
All right. Take care. Thanks for everyone for listening.